So welcome to track 5. Who's been in a track 5 session before? No, a couple of you. Did it live up to its expectation of being slightly different, a little bit more interactive? Good. Okay. I don't want to be the odd one out. So welcome to this session, Learning Systems, Lessons from the Frontline of Learning Technology Implementation. So I'm really keen to get involved in this session. This time last year, I was sat in a room similar to this, lined up, ready to talk about my own learning systems implementation that I'd put in for a company called Mitchells and Butlers, who I've now moved on from. And I remember distinctly, I had to run the session, jump in a cab, go over to the Grosvenor, and pick up the Gold Award. Yeah, still living that dream. So it's something I'm really passionate about. And when Don was talking to me about potentially chairing some sessions, I had 2 criteria. One, can it be a session where I actually know what the speakers are talking about? Hence, I'm here not doing the data one. And secondly, can it be real people talking about real stories and real greatness that they've done? And I think definitely lived up to that. So I've got some fantastic speakers lined up for you. I'm Anthony. I'm the Global Learning Design Manager for Costa Coffee. And I run a team of learning designers who build content for our own learning management system. So that's kind of my background. But my job really is just to get these guys up and running. Hopefully we'll have a really engaging session. It's a track 5 session, so what I always find with these sessions is we'll do the usual presentation. Have you got any questions? A couple of people will ask questions, then we'll move on to the next person. Then we'll get to the end and I'll say, does anyone have any more questions? And you'll all go, no, I'm fine. And I'll say, well, let's go then. And then you'll form a queue to come and talk to people and ask a question, because that's what always happens, right? So we're not going to do that last bit, because I've built that into the session. So what we're going to do is we will do the panel style presentation, specific questions, open questions. Then what I'm going to do is get my guys to just come amongst you. So I'm going to basically situate one in each corner so you can actually sit and ask the question and not think, oh my God, I'm not going to get a coffee before the next one. Okay, so we're going to give ourselves a little bit of time for that. And I think what will happen as a result of that is you'll get the benefit of the guys' experience, but potentially from each other as well. And I'm also happy to be in that mix, and there are some real experts in the room, so I think that will be really good. So if that's okay with you, we'll do the whole, I want to ask them something up close and personal in the session, and then we can have coffee at coffee time. That makes sense? Brilliant. Okay. Right, in that case, I'm going to hand over to my first amazing speaker, who's Steph, who has a fascinating story to tell about Learning Hub.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. So my name's Steph Wild. I'm the LMS manager for York Teaching Hospitals Foundation Trust. And a few years ago, my new boss came along and said to me, oh, Steph, can you sort out online learning? And I was a bit, ooh, okay. Just to put it in the context where we were as an organisation at that time, we were recently merged. So we had been 2 hospitals and a community site. So we'd been 3 organisations, and we'd only just merged. So while our name was York Teaching Hospitals, we were actually very much 3 separate organisations still working underneath that one name. Our new organisation had about 9,500 staff. I know many of you will work globally, but we work in North Yorkshire. Our staff are based over about 3,500 square miles of rural countryside. There are no motorways in our patch. There are some A roads, and some of those A roads have some really small bits of dual carriageway in them. There's a lot of tractors. So consequently, it really had to work for us. Our directors were really keen to have a lovely, fresh new look for a new organisation. And what they also said to me was, you know, when I go on some of this new system, to do my Statman training, I only want to use 3 clicks and I want to be inside the course. So that's another little challenge. We knew, obviously, like all LMSs, we needed to have some good, robust compliance monitoring before we could get on to the more exciting stuff. And we knew that we needed to engage our workforce. All our workforce were they were new to the larger organisation. None of us were used to working in such a big organisation at that point. So the first thing I did was I identified the people who I thought would be able to help us with our new LMS. So my key stakeholders. And my first team was my training teams. So there were 3 different training teams, all working in different hospitals. Some of the hospitals were 40 miles away from each other. So in order to engage with these people, we had an away day. Well, we had a couple actually. Took them outside of the NHS, took them to a rugby club in the centre of our patch, and we discussed what we might like to see with the new training teams as we were merging, and talked about a new LMS at that point. We also have a lot of training providers. So these are what we would call our SMEs. Most of them work clinically and have a real small part of the job is training, but nevertheless, they are integral to how we deliver our training. So set up lots of meetings with these people. You know, they're very, very busy, as we all are, obviously, but went out and met them at different sites, engaged with them in that way. And then our staff. So these are anybody that uses an LMS. We did lots of surveys and sheets. So if somebody came in and did a course, we gave them a sheet, asked them what they thought about an LMS. I wasn't adverse to stopping people in the corridor and having that same discussion. And we did some online surveys as well. And we basically asked all these different people the same 2 questions. What do you like about the LMS that we currently have? And what would you like to change? It was really, really interesting. They all came up with a very, very similar list. And some of the things were key across all areas. So what they said to us was, we don't want another username and password. We have a lot of usernames and passwords for a lot of different systems, and they didn't want it. And also they wanted a system that was simple to use. Our existing LMS was quite cumbersome. And between that and the password, our staff were telling us that e-learning didn't work. Online learning doesn't work because of those 2 main reasons. They said they didn't want to repeat training if they already had the knowledge. We'd been sheep dipping people through training. So every 3 years, you've got to be health and safety. Oh, and it's the same health and safety as you did last time 3 years ago. And actually, you know, they didn't want to have to do that. We didn't want them to have to do that. Our managers and our staff, although they used the LMS, they had access to no reports at all. So managers at that point couldn't see what their staff were up to in terms of training. And they wanted that direct access. They wanted to be in charge. And our staff want to be in charge. They want to know what they've done. They want to know that we know what they've done. And they want to be able to keep on top of that themselves. And then our training providers wanted to be able to use lots of different things inside their courses. They want a real blended approach. They've been used to doing face-to-face. They've been used in SCORM, but they hadn't been doing blogs, forums, being able to easily create a quiz, just add an odd question, throw something in, and they really wanted some more intuitive course design. So from that, we formulated a plan, and the plan was to implement all the previous list, all our key stakeholder comments, find a supplier who was willing to give us the system that we wanted, not the one that they wanted to give it us. Because we knew that partway through the process, we might change our mind about a few things. And we wanted a supplier who would allow us to do that and move and flex with us. We decided to start with a real small amount of courses and make sure they worked. Now that sounds a bit bizarre, saying make sure they worked, but because the perception was that online learning didn't work, we needed to be doubly sure that when we launched, everything went absolutely smoothly. So we just started with StatMand and the IT systems training, our patient record system. That's all we started with. And also to visit the Learning Technologies Conference and find out what everybody else was doing, of course. So the year I came to Learning Technologies, everybody was talking about Totura LMS. And we did end up with Totura LMS and Totura Learn. We tendered, as you would do, and we got Chambray Learning Solutions as our supplier because we felt that they would flex and allow us to do what we wanted to do with our LMS and change when we needed to. And over the coming months, We worked with them and with our HR team. We downloaded all our staff data, all their profile fields, all their records. We worked out the processes for keeping that up to date on a weekly basis. We downloaded all the training history from our previous LMSs. We worked with the training teams to develop learning plans, so who needs to do what, how often. Because we'd had 3 organisations, they were all doing different things at different times, so there was a real need to standardise everything and have us doing the same things. And we worked with the trainers to develop new courses that weren't just face-to-face, or they weren't just SCORM. They had links to YouTube, bits of video in them, an odd quiz, a forum, whatever the training provider really wanted. So we spent quite a lot of time working on all those. So go live, we did it quite quietly. We popped a link on our intranet and we put some comms out and we let it grow slowly. Okay, so we just let it grow. All staff got access at the same time. Nobody needed to put a username and password in. It was all single sign-on. After about a week, we put out a comms bulletin. Just let it roll on its own. That's what we did. We made sure there was easy to follow instructions on all the screens, so staff weren't ringing us and asking us how to do things. They could see it themselves, they could help themselves. We had worked with the training providers and put knowledge assessments on a lot of our courses. And we used to get people phone and say, oh, I've just done the health and safety quiz and I've passed it. Does that really mean I don't have to do any training? I was like, yes, that's what it means. It's like, oh, that's fantastic. So that went down really well. And we also made live reports available to all staff. So our learners all got information about their own learning. They could see the courses they'd completed and when. And our managers also have access to their team's learning, so they could see how their team was doing at the click of a button. At that point, we asked our staff for their help. We knew that there was lots and lots of records in folders in wards and departments that weren't on our LMS, and it was things that were more practically based. So, for example, manual handling. What we said was ask the managers to verify and send us in those records, and we added them to the new LMS because they just weren't there at that point. So we asked for that help. We also said, 9,500 staff, we've done all the learning profiles, they might not be perfect, have a look, check them. Have you got what you think you should have? Have your staff got what you think they should have? If not, let us know and we'll work through that. And we gave everybody in the organisation 6 months to get up to date with the StatMand. We didn't chase anybody at all during that 6-month period. We just let people get used to it, let people know about the training records that weren't on there, let people tell us where we'd missed things or given them things that they didn't need to do. So these are some of our compliancy rates, as was and as is. So pre-launch is the first column. After the first 6 months, bearing in mind we'd done absolutely no chasing of anybody, we just said, oh, there's a new LMS here for your StatMand. Go on, have a go, see what you think. And then again, January 2019, to get from the pink column to the green column in reality took us about a year. Now, I'd like to say it was just the LMS that did that. Of course it wasn't. It was the redesign of the learning as well as the LMS. It was the managers now being able to see what their staff's compliancy was, because they couldn't see that before, and chasing them. So it was a real collaboration of things. So what I'd say to you about your LMSs, don't think you know best. Ask other people around them. We've given our staff some ownership of the LMS, in so much as they now know that they're in charge of their own training records, because they know they could add things to them initially. So they're aware that it's their record and they need to look after it, or they can look after it. In terms of other things that we've measured, our finance team did a measurement a couple of months ago and worked out that annually now, because of the way that we deliver this training, we're saving between £100,000 and £120,000 every year on training time, so travel time and things like that. So that's a huge amount of money. These are some of the comments our staff set have given us from various surveys. In January, 5,500 members of our staff logged into our learning management system at least once. So it gets a lot of usage. We had over 6,000 course completers recorded in January. They wouldn't all be online learning. A lot of them would be bums on seats or more traditional learning, but that's the volume of traffic we're getting on the system at the moment. Okay, thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Oh, that's all right.
Thank you, Steph.
Okay.
This one on?
Can I give you that?
That one on? Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of things I want to just touch on.
Okay.
So there was a couple of things that really triggered some fond memories for me, like importing user records. And the reason it reminded me of when I had to import my 2.5 million records is because the guy who did it is sat right there. So I think that's a really important point, is if you're going to change this, if you're going to change from one system to another, don't start from ground zero. Give people we remember what you did and we haven't forgotten all that. And I think single sign-on is another thing that is huge. Nobody wants another username and password, so work on that. But the thing I think really resonated with me is when you're selecting a vendor, generally speaking, the people that select an LMS are the people that are going to be administering the LMS. Guess which bit the vendors tend to get right? User experience or administration? So really spend time with your users, your stakeholders, to make sure that that experience is right. Because I promise you, everything you want from the back end of an LMS is there. You can ask those questions, but they're going to say, yes, it can. Can it engage people? Maybe a different one. So can we have a big round of applause for Steph, please? And a big one for Tom, too, who's going to take the stage.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'm Tom Dove-Wallington. I'm the Global Director of Learning and Development at Springer Nature. Just to very quickly cover off who Springer Nature are, we are a scientific and academic publisher. These are some of our brands. We've got many, many more. We are global, and you would probably have come across us in your university days as a very minimal. So, my journey with learning management systems. Well, in the early 2000s, I was a chef, and I decided to change career and go into learning and development. And when I went into learning and development, I thought, you know, this e-learning thing is going to be massive. And I can remember at that time, I grabbed an old server from the IT department, downloaded Moodle version 1, built it, got a proof of concept, signed it off, and then rolled it out. And ever since then, I've been rolling out learning management systems or expanding them or delivering them to different parts of our business. And that led me to 2012 to join a company called, what was then called Macmillan Science and Education. At that point, they had no LMS and no digital learning course. Well, actually, they had one very bad compliance course, but that was it. So I came in and I rolled out a learning management system, digital learning, and tried to change the culture around that. My initial launch was to 7,500 users across 3 different business groups. And what I'm going to try and share with you today is, as you can see, since I've been there, I've then rolled it out again and again, and that's given me a very unique opportunity. I've been very lucky. I've made a lot of mistakes and then had the chance to actually try to do things differently and see how that makes an impact over the following years. So I'm going to try and, there's a lot of things I've done wrong, but I'm going to try and focus on 4 key things. The first one is around communication and engagement. When we're working on a learning management system implementation project, we spend an awful lot of time building our roadmap of our comms up until the launch day. We then support the launch day with the roadshows that we've designed. We support them with lots of support. I can even remember cakes coming out in our organisation to support one of our rollouts. I do like cake, and that was a good idea. But we've done the launch. We've had a great launch, but we've done it. And then we stop. It's time to go back to our normal jobs. And one of the things we realised that from 2012 is most of our projects and all of our project resources were built up to that first launch, and then they stopped. And the trouble is with this type of technology, and when you're trying to change the culture towards digital learning, it doesn't stop in week or 1 or 2. It goes on for several years. So one of the first things we learned is when we roll out new learning technology or expand them, the communications and engagement plan we put in place has to become the new norm. It doesn't stop after the roll. We still do roadshows many years on for different businesses. And that way, what we've managed to do, as well as getting that initial surge, is start to embed it into our culture and continually grow it with our learners. And this is just an illustrative graph of what it looks like. When I first rolled out, we got that initial surge, and then it went down. We hadn't embedded it. As we did follow-in rollouts, what we then saw is we got the initial surge, and then over year 1 and 2, we just kept creeping along, building more and more over a period of time. And what leads me to one of the second things we learned is within our audience, we have lots of different types of people, and their comfort with digital learning is very, very different. That initial surge was often the people that were most comfortable with our digital learning. And as we went through, what we started to realize, and I talk about this as 5 groups, we have a clear group of people that are digital natives. These are the people that have lived with technology all their lives, absolutely love it. This is second nature to them. They don't think of any way ever of learning. They will turn to Google, YouTube, whatever's out there to learn. We then have a second group. These are digital supporters. These are people like me. A lot of our life has been with technology, and that means we have really decided to promote and push it. You don't need to sell it to us. Occasionally, you just need to nudge us, because with new cutting-edge technology, we sometimes miss it. We then found we had what we termed as a group of digital adopters. We're in academic and scientific research. We have a lot of people who come from universities. Their background is from lectures, from reading books, from publishing papers. They believe that they need to learn via digital methods. They just need support to get there. And that brings me nicely to my next group, which is the Not Sures. This group were similar, but they weren't bought into digital learning. They still wanted to go back to the classroom. When we launched out, and I can always remember putting Excel training online, and we had a whole load of people come to us and want to go, I still want to do Excel training in the classroom, not at the point of need. It took us some time to explain why it was better and why it would help them more to do their jobs. And there is a last group, and I'm completely honest with this, that it took me a while to accept it. We have a group of digital haters. These are the people, no matter how much resource or work you throw at them, will not buy into digital learning. And you end up forcing them to do stuff that they really don't want to do. They're not going to learn from it. And what we've now done is to accept it, identify them, and then just back away as far as possible. So from all of that, we realized we have 5 very distinct groups of people. And one thing I want to know here, because what I started doing is presuming this is generational. It's not. We're a global organization. Different countries adapted technology at different rates. So what I find in our organization is I will find a retired developer or coder. I will also find someone who's just come out of school with no computer literacy. So although we can identify these groups, we had to be very careful about our presumptions and the way we worked with them. That also led me to realize that with our digital learning technologies, one size does not fit all. But that is a big problem. We have one learning management system. Now we have to get one learning management system to fit our audience. Our digital natives are sat there using the most cutting-edge consumer technology. Our learning management system, even walking around the exhibition today, they're still not quite at that cutting-edge front in a lot of cases. So we're having to make the most of it and manage their expectations and just temper them down. So we have to build the system for the many. When we build the system, the second thing we often made a mistake about, and this is something that was said a second ago, is we started to talk to our key stakeholders first, our HR and L&D teams. Our HR teams wanted it to work with the performance management process. Our L&D teams wanted the simplest administration possible. Our IT teams wanted the most stable and data secure system that minimized the number of help desk queries they got. What we found is that did not lend itself to good user experience or good usage. So we did start to talk to our users and engage in them and collecting their feedback. We tried a different number of feedback models, and we didn't find one particularly better than another. We used surveys. This gave us great breadth of information, but not a lot of depth. We used focus groups. That gave us more depth, but there was a risk of groupthink, especially when you have one really strong character, which we tended to find led the conversation. We also did one-to-one conversations. These were the most depth, but the most time-consuming. And it was from one of these, and I'll just share a little bit of feedback because it will relate to something I'll show you in a bit. I can remember sitting down with a senior manager who said, so, what are you here to talk me to about? And I said, a digital learning platform. And he turned around, oh, the compliance platform. Now I know what you mean. And I'll come back to that in a second. But when we started collecting that feedback, we realized we could not do one survey and then build the system and leave it as is. It had to be continuous. But I don't have a massive team. I can't gather feedback all the time. So the way we do it is by doing it in small groups, rotating it around the world and doing it at different stages at different points and varying the type of questions we ask. The second thing we realized is we needed to be really, really careful on the questions we asked. If you go out and ask the question, was this digital course good? They give you the feedback on what they thought to that digital course, not whether that digital course was relevant to them, whether it was useful, and whether it helped them with their business performance. So we needed to design the questions to actually work for us. But stepping on and going on to that note about that compliance course, one of the things I then realized when I sat down with that senior manager and started talking to them, and one of the big things that we realized about what was the perception of our learning technologies is all of our new joiners into the organization, the first thing they saw was our compliance training. And it wasn't pretty. It was horrendous. And unfortunately, that was our shop window. That was their first impression. And they didn't go any further, not surprisingly, really. So we took our compliance training in-house. We completely rebuilt it to try and make it as high-end and as good quality as possible. But we also did something quite unusual. I've used the term compliance training until now. I'm now going to switch to the term mandatory training, because all of this training had been driven by our compliance department. This is the business risk. These are the courses we need. So we had to keep that element, but we went out and talked to our workers' councils and employee representation bodies and employees directly and asked them, was there anything else we should do? And the strangest thing was they started suggesting courses to us that they thought should be mandatory. And I won't go through the list, but my favorite one was we launched a course called Unconscious Bias. I think most of you will be familiar with unconscious bias. And we made it mandatory. And it really went down well. And we managed to then use that as a shop window to direct people onto other courses in our catalogue, helping us to embed that usage, engage them, and lead them into other training. So this was really, really successful for us. And the surprising thing is, since we did that, we have seen increases in our usage of our LMS substantially year on year. So that has been a big thing for us. So this brings me to the summary. Getting a strange microphone glitch there. So bringing me on to the summary. So there were 4 key things that I've talked about, which is communications and engagement. Don't build them to day one. If you stop there, it stops. Understand your user population and expectations. Don't make the presumptions, though. It's automatic that we do, but we need to stop. Don't let HR and IT lead the system design. Talk to your users, get their involvement, focus on the user experience. But just on one comment on user experience. Hello? User experience isn't the only thing. User experience should lead to culture change and embedding of your learning technologies. If you have a fantastic system, but it's not leading to that culture change, then it's not working for you. And the final thing, make the most of your mandatory training. It is your shop window, and it will be the thing most people see first. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Who has a question for Tom? Fantastic. I knew you would.
Thanks very much. Really interesting. You spoke a little bit about gauging feedback loops and kind of doing that manually. Do you think it's possible to automate that process?
I can actually be a bit more honest, with the large surveys we do, we use Qualtrics, and then we use a tool called Gavagi for data mining of the text analytics we get out at the end. So we do automate it where we can, but even with good text mining tools, we've not found them very reliable in some things, and it does end up leading to people having to read through at least some of the comments.
Even to take a step back from actually surveying out. Sorry, even to take a step back before surveying out, do you think it's possible to get analytics from your systems to not have to survey, to require that? Do you think it's possible to
yes,
to
to
gauge
a point.
that?
You can use, you can integrate with Google to get Google Analytics across the system, and that allows us to see what pages people are visiting on the platform, see what they're generally looking at, as well as the traditional more SCORM or ex-API type feedback and reporting. Also, we changed the mail programs we use so we could see what types of mails people were reading more in lines with marketing and communications. And that also gave us feedback, because then we could start to see what communications were having impact and what weren't. So it's using a lot of different scrapes. We have a social intranet that also gives us wonderful data. I hate blogging, but I blog regularly now because one of the things I realized is it has quite a good impact for us. But yeah, we're looking at a lot of different sources for our data and analytics even before we talk to the users. And that sometimes gives us some quite good control data of what hasn't worked. It also gives us some very nice data, because going back to those compliance courses, once we rebuilt them, the lowest satisfaction score on any of those compliance courses, now this is a simple 5-star grid, is 4.2. I've never had a compliance course where the lowest one is 4.2 out of 5. So we've got very satisfied users, which again tells us we're doing the right thing.
Stuff. Anyone else? Yep, there's one over here. Helping me with my step count. Thank you very much.
So we talk a lot about technology here in the conference, and look at your second and third points. And what I understand is you've spent a lot of time understanding what the user wants and pushing back on system design. Was that difficult? And do you have any tips for how we might do that and maintain that once the system's actually implemented?
One of the things I did is actually took a lot of the system administration, which had been traditionally with our IT teams, away and put it inside the L&D team. We even have now our own support desk for the LMS system we use is within my team. And part of the reason for that was it's about stakeholder management, but I don't want to use the word control. But what we realized is IT just didn't have the right understanding or view of the system. Whereas if we gave the L&D coordinators more direct access and to help our users, they could work with them, help them be supported with the system, be able to fix it, but also start to see common problems and issues coming straight back from our users. So going back to the point there, feedback, that really helped us with it. What I was very lucky on is I had a very understanding CTO who could see my point. I have worked with others who are very, I don't want to let go of any technology. I haven't got a trick yet on how to beat some of those people. I wish I did. But I was very lucky on that side.
Brilliant. I think there was one more. Yay, all the way back over there. Super. Can I just squeeze through?
How did you get your user groups to do the focus groups? So I know I've got a similar size organisation, and I know if I went out now and say, come be part of a focus group for L&D, I wouldn't get much take-up.
We didn't just do it on L&D. That was one of the tricks. So I work in a wider function called talent development and performance. So when we ran the focus groups, we didn't just focus on learning. We tried to mix in a few different themes. So we needed to build a new performance management system at the same time, talk to them about bonus and remuneration policy, just brought that in, and we took cake. See, cake's always a winner and gets people to buy in. I'm going to be brutally honest on that one, you can tell. But yeah, we tried to give them a reason to come to us, and we knew that if we just went with one thing, it wouldn't necessarily interest people. But if we went with several things, it would get a larger group. But also we're fairly open with the fact that we wanted people to want to come to us. So we tried not to select groups, which I know in some companies you go out and say to your manager population, can you suggest 10 people? And they get voluntold to come to you. So we used our social intranet more to find out who were interested, get them to come in, a little bit of bribery. It all worked well in the end.
Big round of applause for Tom, please. I've learnt a new word today. Voluntold. I love that. I'm using that. Over to Michael.
Okay.
Is it working? Hey, next one.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name's Michael Redford. I am the LMS program lead at Mettler-Toledo, and I will be focusing on effectively applying LMS automation. And my presentation will have some commonality with my co-presenters, because whenever I heard compliance, big theme for us in what we're doing here. So first, as a little bit of background, my role involves managing the LMS globally and managing the e-learning function. And the organization, Mettler-Toledo, is a leading global manufacturer of precision instruments and services for use in laboratories and manufacturing. Our products and services include laboratory balances, industrial scales, retail scales, analytical instruments. Analytical is a key theme with us. Transport and logistics instruments and devices. We have one of our favorite expressions saying, can you measure a soap bubble? Can you weigh a soap bubble? Well, we can. And so therefore, there is a precision required of our training. The demand for training within the organization is increasing, and it's becoming increasingly recognized as a very important factor in our success. Having a highly and effectively trained workforce is a key aspect. So we have 15,400 employees globally. We're in 40 countries with market organizations, and we also have distributors and dealers who help to sell and market our products. We serve 140 countries, and as mentioned before, training is really a key aspect of our success. So the LMS is a key driver of that success and our training strategy. So regarding training value, here you can see a trend that we always like to focus on. These are training completions over the last few years, and you can see the trend is an increase in training completions. Now, of course, we don't always want to play the numbers game, because what if the quality of the training is poor? I can assure you it's not. 82% of our completions were e-learning. My co-presenter spoke quite a bit about e-learning and compliance also. I will be focusing on that as well, with a slightly different emphasis. 40% of our completed trainings were in the areas of sales and service, but 56% of our trainings completed were on functional topics: IT, human resources, compliance, safety, and things of that nature. And the LMS, of course, is the key delivery and tracking mechanism. And it's not just a system for us. We try to be as strategic as possible with this. And I will touch on that with the automation pieces, the way that we use the LMS to save manual labor of myself and my fellow LMS administrators. So we use the sum total LMS, and we've had great success with that over the years. And here you see a screenshot of the training item that I will be focusing on to explain my points. It's the Code of Conduct e-learning. Compliance training, once again. Very important. And as mentioned before, the majority of the company has their first introduction to the LMS and to a lot of our e-learning content through this Code of Conduct training, which is required of everybody in the organization on a yearly basis. So everybody has to complete it every year. The first aspect that I'll focus on in the category of automation and making things simpler for us as LMS administrators and training responsibles is the ability to manage multiple languages. Now, the Code of Conduct e-learning we have is available in 13 languages. We do those translations, the company does. But the LMS itself has the ability to manage many languages, which is very important for us. So how it works is that everyone in the organization has an LMS account, and we get the data from our human capital management system, the data HR system. It syncs to the LMS, and we're able to identify the preferred language of each individual. And then the LMS itself recognizes that language, and all the standard menu items in the LMS are delivered in that language. So here you can see the German language is on the home screen there, and that much of that is done by the SumTotal LMS. Now, not everything is translated. The system doesn't translate our homemade text. So we, for example, with the Code of Conduct e-learning, we translate all of the content into 13 languages, and we have 13 versions of this e-learning. We do that translation ourselves. But having these standard menu items also translated is a huge help for us. Notifications. Very often, well, every time, generally, with an e-learning, the notification is the first entry. It's basically the initiation to the learning activity for the learner. And this may shock you. I'm glad you're sitting down, but not everybody jumps for joy when they are assigned into a Code of Conduct e-learning. It's thrilling for everybody, I know, but everyone's already 120% busy. And even in my role as the LMS program lead, when I get enrolled into an e-learning, enthusiasm isn't the first initial response. Everyone's busy, so you want to make this as simple and inviting as possible. Simplicity is key. So notifications, the communication aspect of the e-learning delivery, that's huge. That's very huge. And we have these automated. We have a variety of notifications. Once you set the learning activity up in the back end, then you just let it roll. You basically can organize the assignment notifications, providing the instructions for the learner, so there's no confusion. This directly correlates with completion percentages and learner satisfaction. There are deadline reminders, because we give people 30 days to complete the e-learning. So we give them a little nudge after day 15 and say, don't forget about your deadline. And then we give them a little stronger nudge when the deadline has been missed. And then we give them 4 more little nudges every week that they're past the deadline. So these notifications can be really helpful, and they definitely are central to our success of our compliance campaigns. And also, not just compliance, but all the other trainings that the divisions, the units, the local and regional HR departments use. So this is a key aspect of that. And these can be scheduled and automated. One thing that's really helpful, as mentioned, we have 15,400 employees. To manage global learning campaigns, if you don't analyze and if you don't plan, this could result in unnecessary manual effort that is certainly not fun to do. Some of LMS administration is by nature labor intensive, unless you have these automation aspects built into your LMS itself and also into your planning. So when looking at your LMS, selecting one, evaluating one, look for these features or functionalities within the LMS. Also with your global training campaigns or local training campaigns, you could have thousands and thousands in just one city or one country. Look for these time-saving opportunities within the system itself and within your plans rolling out your campaign. So one of these important things that we have is a data upload job. So with our global compliance campaign, it's 15,400 people per year, and each month we assign 1,300. That's a lot of people if we had to do this in a manual process. So we get the HR data in Excel format, and we upload this to the LMS, and the assignments can be done automatically through this process. So what could take a long time, 1,300 assignments per month, takes just a few minutes through a data import job, and that's really, really helpful for us. That can also, these kinds of data import jobs aren't just for assignments of e-learnings. It can also be, for example, let's just imagine a new country comes online and there are 500 new users. If you have to enter manually all the properties, that would be difficult. You can do a data import job for a variety of different things. So that's something that really reduces our effort there. Scheduled delivery of reports. So as mentioned before, training campaigns involve stakeholders. To get the biggest return on investment on your training campaigns, you want to not just assign people and say, have a great time, good luck. You want to educate and involve key stakeholders. And that is what I'm referring to, which helps me obtain the highest completion percentages, is management. National, regional, upper management. To get their buy-in and to get their support, give them transparency of how well the campaign is doing, not just for compliance, but to say, hey, this training initiative that we invested quite a lot in, how are we doing? What's the completion? What's the learner satisfaction? So reports are a key way that we identify the success of our training campaigns. And you can schedule these reports. What we do for the Code of Conduct is, with the LMS, you can schedule reports and identify who this is going to be sent to. So for example, if the Chinese employees, their deadline is coming up, we can schedule reports to be automatically sent to upper management from China so they get an overview of how they're doing. And it's all done in the back end. It's relatively simple. And once you set certain parameters, you can just let it go and not really have to think about it. And one other example is a new feature that I've become quite fond of because it's increased my popularity within my training community, is the automatic assignment of new hires. New hires, it can be very easy to lose track of them, and they don't get the correct training when they join. With the LMS that we have, we create a mechanism, or we utilize a mechanism called an audience. And it's a mechanism where you set certain rules, for example, saying he or she joined after January 1st, 2019. This particular audience is for North America, so they take the Code of Conduct and 5 HR-specific United States trainings. And then when they join, boom, automatically they get assigned. So there are things you can set up right away for specific training audiences and have automatic assignments taken care of for you. So this has been nice for me because with the Code of Conduct in the past, the many local and regional actors had to do the new hire assignments. And I was happy to say, hey, everybody, I can take this for you. And with a few clicks, we can organize all of the new hire assignments globally. So it's a very nice feature. So just to conclude, I'm open for questions, but again, when selecting an LMS, it's important to keep these kinds of things in mind because without the proper planning and without the proper system, you might get bogged down by lots of manual effort, which can reduce your satisfaction, and also your fellow LMS administrator community could have some frustration. So utilizing these kinds of automation options are advised.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Who has questions? No questions. Okay, we'll go straight on to Mike.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh. Get back in the center.
Can I ask, how soon after when you were starting the implementation phase did you turn on the notifications? Because when you're starting that development part, it's very easy to send out hundreds of emails very quickly and notifications. Can I ask how you went from 0 to switching your emails on?
Well, I think you bring up a very good point. With notifications, I probably should have said, be very careful with them, because that can also be spam. So if you don't have things set up correctly, you can spam or notify lots of people for things they're not involved in. But just to make sure that I understand the question, you're saying how did I best utilize notifications and learn how to use these?
How do you switch on from going from developing the LMS to switching on the notifications? What was that process?
That's a good question. With notifications, it's a lot like other parts of the system where, like my colleagues mentioned here, involving stakeholders. When I joined the organization 4 years ago, I was a bit of a novice with this particular LMS, the sum total LMS. I had used other ones, but basically I went in and just got schooled by my fellow administrators and saying, how do you use the system yourself? What mistakes can I avoid? And I made plenty of mistakes on my own, which I learned from, but to try to kind of use their expertise, and notifications were part of that. You can overdo it with emails. Spam is a word that I used, and that was one of the first complaints I had when I first joined, is that a lot of the LMS administrators and trainers didn't really have it set up so nicely, so that emails went out all over the place that weren't really necessary. So it's an activity by activity kind of decision, but I'd say that less is more. Don't over spam people. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can I ask you all to do me a favor? Can everybody stand up? Just for a second. I want to make sure the energy level is right. All I need you to do is a neck roll. A nice neck crunch, a little neck roll. Get rid of that tension. Nobody's going to fall asleep, and everybody's going to sit down. Thank you very much for indulging me. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Michael Vincent. I'm the Global Head of Talent and Learning for a travel franchise business called Travel Counsellors. If you've never heard of Travel Counsellors, I'll tell you a little bit of our background and who we are and what we do. Effectively, we're a franchise travel business that allows people to set up their own travel business. We operate globally across 6 different countries. We cover Australia, South Africa, Dubai, the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, and the UK, where we're headquartered. And this afternoon, I'm going to share with you my story around our experience of implementing a global learning management system. I'm going to keep this relatively quick. I've got a 30-minute presentation, and I've got 10 minutes, and I've had too many coffees, so please bear with me. So, our story. Travel Counsellors, 2,000 self-employed business owners spread across the globe, with around 1,100 people based in the UK, the other 1,000 people based in the rest of the global locations. We're 24 years old. This year we'll turn over around £670 million. We've had double-digit growth of 16% per annum consecutively for the last 10 years, and we're a PE-owned business. We're pacey, we're entrepreneurial, we're fast-paced, and I work for a highly challenging CEO who expects us to be at the forefront of everything digital, and that allows us to give all of our travel counsellors the best opportunity to be the best version of themselves that they can. So in terms of who we are and what we do, that's what we do. My challenge when I was presented 2 years ago, and it was in January 2017, I inherited, having joined the business, a legacy e-learning system that I'm sure many of you will have experienced. It was clunky, wasn't particularly user-friendly, didn't naturally help us deliver the kinds of solutions and learning and development interventions that we needed to be able to offer. So, in terms of pace, in January 2017, we took 5 weeks to go out to the market and to look at the different learning management providers and to look at the roadmaps that they had and to try to identify a partner that was going to be able to deliver on the things that we wanted. So we needed to be able to support a global audience, we needed to deliver on a globally consistent induction process, and we needed to be able to do that in a very quick and turn it around in a very fast process. We identified our learning partner, and that partner is Litmus. Litmus are down on the floor today. They've gone through a number of changes over the last 2 years, but at the time we chose to work with Litmus, they shared the same kinds of values that we did. They had a system that was, from a cost perspective, was highly cost-effective, but from a functionality perspective, provided us with the types of functionality that we knew our users globally would want and expect from us. In terms of preparing our learning management system, we took from February 2017 until March 2017 to start to create the content that would allow us to launch in June 2017 to a global audience of franchise business owners. Now, the reason that I mentioned that there is an audience of franchise business owners is because these people don't have to do anything necessarily. We have rules and regulations that they need to follow, but effectively they're a franchise business owner. So we needed to give them a reason to go to the learning management system. And our vision is to become the most loved travel company in the world. And in essence, the challenge from the CEO was this. In order to scale our business with intimacy, we need to be able to provide our people with a tool that will enable them to deliver on their future without limits and to think about their legacy so that when they exit Travel Counsellors, that they were exiting with a clear legacy statement in mind. So effectively from today's session, I'm going to cover 3 areas. I'm going to talk about the global challenges, and I'll reference our induction process. I'll talk about technology and infrastructure, and I'll talk about 2 systems but 1 outcome. And I'm going to start at the end. 2 systems, but 1 outcome. Effectively, the first thing that we did in February 2017 was to identify a 3-stage phased approach to the way we were going to launch our programs. We were clear that we were going to launch the first phase of our program, our new learning management, in June 2017. We had a clear idea of the content, we had a clear idea of how we were going to design it, and more importantly, we had a clear idea of what the 2.0 system was going to look like when we launched that in the December. So in the May, we were able to use some user experience testing, and we piloted a very short program with some global colleagues to make sure that we got feedback in terms of the look, the feel, and the level of intuitivity. Sorry, that's a new word I've made up, it's a Welshism. The level of intuition, being able to work the way through the site without needing to be trained. We wanted something which was that they could easily navigate through, that could be mobile optimized, that could be used in a time and a place that suited them, and it didn't matter whether that was via a laptop, a desktop, a mobile, or a tablet device. One of the global challenges was to make sure we had consistency around the induction process that took place, whether you were in Melbourne, Cape Town, or in the UK. And what we were able to do by delivering our new learning management system was to create 5 direct and distinct routes of entry that meant that depending on how you joined the business, you either joined on a 16-week induction program that included 7 days of face-to-face training and then 16 weeks of structured e-learning. And that then moved through to the widest version, which was our academy program, which effectively is a 17-day face-to-face classroom induction supported by a 32-week post-course induction process that's delivered through the learning management system. We applied an 80-20 rule, and that was 80% of the content we designed in the UK was rolled out to the global audience, and the 20% they were able to tailor to make sure that it took into account local cultures, local challenges, or nuances that might have been different in the markets that they were operating in. In terms of the design challenges, we encountered many, and I think George Bush once talked about the known unknowns, and he got himself a bit tied up with that particular statement, but we knew along the way that we were going to encounter challenges that we perhaps hadn't anticipated, and we did. One of those was local infrastructure, and I'll just share one example. When we rolled the system out, and we rolled it out in June 2017, on one day to the global audience of 2,000 users, we realised, and perhaps naively we hadn't realised, that for many of our remote South African travel counsellors who operated in very remote parts of South Africa, connectivity was a real problem. And we're a video-rich business. We have television studios in each of our 6 global offices, and we use that as our primary way of communicating with our travel counsellors. What we hadn't anticipated was that loading the learning management system with a lot of video-rich content, when that went out to our South African colleagues, actually that created a bit of a problem. So once we'd rolled that out and we'd learned that lesson, we were able to tweak the content so that by the time we got to December 2017, when we launched version 2.0, we were able to take into account from a South African perspective specifically that we would tweak the content. 2 things we did. We switched down the video. We chose to not upload high-quality video. We chose to upload the lowest quality video that we could. And where possible, we replaced the video with content that was consumable offline. Ultimately, this was all about supporting a powerful and compelling employee value proposition. So if we were going out to the market in recruiting, how did we differentiate from other travel franchise businesses globally? And by introducing people to the learning management system and talking to them about the things that they were able to do to take responsibility for their own learning, we weren't then focusing necessarily on mandatory or compliance training. We were focusing on value-adding training that was going to make a significant difference to them and their businesses. And ultimately, we wanted to drive high engagement across the business. But that's a challenge for everybody. So how did we do that? In simple terms, we created a digital toolkit, but effectively what we did was we operate on a technology platform that is updated on a 3-weekly sprint. And normally that 3-weekly sprint would have been hosted by a TV show that went out live on a Wednesday every 3 weeks. And what we did was we decided to do a pre-record every 3 weeks and host the content through the online learning system, thereby making it compulsory or mandatory for people to observe the updates, but we did it in a very stealthy way. So we get now around 1,800 people, unique users, logging in every single month into the system. In the first instance, it's because they need to see the new updates to the Phoenix technology platform, but in the second instance, they then look at what other content sits within the learning management system. So we recognized 3 things we needed people to be able to have: right skills to be able to do the job, They needed a toolkit to be able to deliver the skills that they needed. And ultimately, if we could provide them with a digital toolkit, that would help create the right mindset to make them believe that they were able to do the things that they needed to do. Now, I mentioned that we had 2 different approaches. One approach for our self-employed business owners, and one approach for our head office global teams of 450 people based between Manchester and Melbourne. The thing that we did when we were in the design phase was we created a very powerful persona. We recognised, and when we launched this in June 2017, at that time, I'm a Welshman if you hadn't noticed, I'm a very passionate Welsh rugby fan. And it hurt me when I stood up in the mini conferences, when I went on a tour of the globe, to stand up and say, if you think about some of the best sports people, the most entrepreneurial business people, the most successful people in the world, what are the common traits that they have? And one of the things that comes back time and time again is that they have personal coaches or mentors, people who help develop and push them and test them. So we named our system Coach. Some people might say that's not particularly exciting, but we sold it as it's your personal coach in your pocket. You can consume the data irrespective of whether you're a head office user or a self-employed business owner, whether you're sat next to the pool in Mallorca, as long as you've got a Wi-Fi connection, you can use Coach and you can consume the content that's there at a time and a place that suits you. In terms of the persona, this is the persona. It's actually a combination of my learning management manager, Ben, and myself. It's got my little cowslick and it's got Ben's glasses, but effectively it's now sewn into the data of everything that we do. If you're a new starter joining us on an academy program, you've got 32 weeks of induction, including 2 weeks of pre-induction, which is delivered through Coach. Ben's voice has become the voice of Coach, so people know and love his voice. So anything that we do, which is voiced over, is now delivered through Ben. And basically, it's got a persona, it's got a vibe, it's got a feel. People recognise it, and they recognise the value that it can add. So Coach is our learning management system. We never talked about it as being an LMS. We've never talked about it as being anything other than it's your coach designed to help and support you. And whether you're an individual business owner or whether you're a global head office colleague, it's there to help and support you on your learning journey and ultimately to help you be the very best version of you that you can be. I'll just wrap up with a couple of top tips. My top tips to anybody embarking on the delivery of a brand new learning management system or reinvigorating your learning management system. My first tip would be clear about what it is that you're aiming to do. Have a clear plan with clear deliverables where you've got your stakeholders involved so that you understand what are they expecting and what are you going to be delivering. My second tip would be, don't have plan for rollout version 1. Have a rolling plan. We had an 18-month plan, which meant that we had the agility and flexibility to take feedback on board and learn from the mistakes that we'd made. But we also had the ability to be clear about how we were going to add depth and breadth to the content that sat therein. And finally, my top tip would be, and talk to the people who you meet at the conference or reach out to people who do things that are similar to us. I feel very honoured to have the opportunity to stand up and share my story with all of you. But the one learning I would have is go and talk to other like-minded people who've experienced the kinds of things that you're about to embark on and take their advice and information on board. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I've given you 30 minutes in about 10. Thank you very much. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd be very happy to take them on board.
Thank you, Mike. Fantastic. So if there are questions for Mike, Mike's going to be here for the next 10, 15 minutes, as are all of my speakers. So I want to kind of wrap up the formal part of this by saying I've taken a lot out of this session, and I think if I were to summarize it, one thing from each person, it would be really, really talk to the people who are going to be involved in this system, not just the people that sit at the back and pull the reports. Who's using it? Who needs to benefit from it? Who are the stakeholders? Absolutely do that. You will be focused on day one, but that's not the end of your focus. Keep that going. Keep that momentum going. If you're going to get a spike, keep it going. Move it forward. I think one thing that I really like from Michael's presentation is that element of automation. There's an awful lot of stuff going on in your LMS. Make it work for you. Build the rules, set the programs, let things just happen, and use that campaign thinking like a marketing team would. What happens at this stage? Then what's the next stage? Then what's the next stage? So it's not a one and done situation. And lastly, what I really love about Mike's presentation is bring your platform to life. Have some personality behind it. Have a really compelling reason to go and enjoy it. And if you can shift the focus away from it's an LMS into something a little bit more tangible and beneficial, I think that will really help you guys out. So all of my speakers are going to be around in this room, and I'm just going to get them to kind of distribute themselves. So you can go and have that chat. We've got about an extra 5 minutes on top, so you will get a coffee. As you will know, working for who I work for, coffee is very important. And, you know, it's literally down there where you can get a good cup of coffee at very reasonable prices. But if you do want to depart, thank you very much, guys, and have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully catch up with you soon. We'll be around for as long as you want us.